into another edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by thehoosier.com. Also, this episode brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors, carrying all the gear you need from all the top brands, and also all at prices that you'll love. I'll tell you more about them here in just a minute. But welcome in. And it is once again game week for Indiana football. After a nice idle week, after a very emotional, hard-fought win on the road at Iowa. But now things don't get any easier for the Hoosiers. They're going to take on the Oregon Ducks this Saturday all the way out in Eugene. College game day is going to be in town, so definitely going to be a raucous atmosphere out west and a real test, another real test for the Hoosiers to see if they're ready to take another step forward into becoming what, in Kurt Signetti's words, the next rising superpower in college football. So we'll see if the Hoosiers are ready to, take that step. And we're going to talk with Doug from the QB11 Show, a brand new guest for In Touch with Indiana Sports. Excited to have him on. No Mitchell Page this week, giving him a week off since the Hoosiers were also off. So well-deserved rest from our man, Mitchell Page. And then we'll also talk a little round ball, a little basketball with Kyler Staley. There's been a lot going on with the men's and women's basketball program. We're really primarily talking about the men's program today. But we're I think officially less than a month away from tipping off basketball season. So we're going to catch up on all things IU basketball with Kyler on the other side during our second guest segment. And hopefully you guys enjoy all of that and more on today's show. A couple of quick things. I'm going to go and get to our quick hitters before we bring on our first guest, and then we'll save our non-rev shout-outs, as always, for the end of the show. But a couple quick news and notes. First off, rest of the season for Indiana football is sold out. That means Michigan State in about a week and a half or so for the old brass spittoon game. That game is sold out. UCLA, we'll talk more about them in a moment. My goodness. That game is sold out. And then you got, of course, Wisconsin rounding out the home slate. And again, in similar fashion to last season, Indiana sells out kind of the back half of their home slate. I mean, more than half their games. I mean, every conference home game now sold out for 2025. That wasn't the case last year. I don't believe the Maryland game sold out. That was, I believe, if I remember right, their first home conference game. But then everything after that moving forward was sold out. So shout out to the Indiana fans for packing the stadium, packing the rock, as they say. And very excited to see what these home crowds look like whenever the Indiana gets to those matchups. But, of course, you got Oregon this Saturday. Now, I mentioned UCLA. I initially had written down like, we're going to talk about Tino Sinceri being let go from the UCLA staff. And yeah, that's, a big deal. It's unfortunate for him. The only Indiana staffer from last season's team to move on to a different position. He was the UCLA OC for Deshaun Foster, only for 4 games. And that may seem unfair for a brand new OC, but that UCLA ship was sinking, man. I felt like, and I've told you this on this show before, I saw that ship sinking from light years away. And it was the moment that Deshaun Foster spoke at Big Ten Media Days last year. And I know some people have said before that shouldn't be indicative of how somebody is as a head coach, but I feel like it was here in some way, shape, or form. And so UCLA let him go, let Deshaun Foster go, and therefore Sinceri was let go as well. And they responded, their new interim coach, Tim Skipper, along with their other interim coordinators, they responded by winning their first game of the season against top 10 Penn State. I don't have the score right in front of me, but it was one of those kind of UCLA took control from the beginning. I mean, they scored on their first possession. They recovered an onside kick. I believe they scored a field goal after that. And Penn State was playing from behind the entire game. Now, they challenged, so they came back and nearly found a way to win in some cases. But UCLA got the job done. And I saw somewhere where this was, I think on paper, I think this was the first team that had started the season at least 0-4 to beat a team in the top 10 in like 40 years. I'm surprised it's not longer than that, if that's the case. But I guess shout out to UCLA. And I mean, Penn State fans, they are furious with James Franklin, and they were already furious after losing to Oregon, still unable to beat a top 10 team. Now, James Franklin has beaten one top 10 team in his tenure at Penn State, but when you are a program of the caliber of Penn State, you are expected to do that more often than just once. And even though he's had Penn State as a contender and in the Big Ten championship games multiple times, I believe they even won it one year. Even though they've done all of that, it still seems like they're a step behind the Ohio States and the Oregons, of course. And now things are really in shambles after that loss to UCLA for them. So very surprising result. Also, Texas loses to Florida. And for those on Signetti watch with Florida, like myself, anytime Florida can regain some positive momentum with Billy Napier, I'm happy about it. So shout out to the Gators for getting things done against Texas. And both of those teams, rightfully so, drop out of the AP top 25. So I'm glad to see that reflected in the polls. Sometimes you see those teams with preseason expectations get the benefit of the doubt, but they have neither one of those teams have a good win to speak of right now. And even though those two teams probably have a lot of talent on their roster, they've not shown that all of it can be put together to get the results that they desire. So good to see that reflected from the AP pollsters. And Indiana moves up to number 7. They'll face number 3 Oregon this weekend. I mean, I don't know if this is the truth or not, but it wouldn't surprise me if this is the highest ranked matchup ever between two programs. Now, I guess Indiana might have been pretty high when they faced Ohio State last year, so maybe it kind of equalizes in that sense. But Indiana being number 7, I mean, you have a chance if you win the game. You definitely will jump up to at least number 3, maybe number 2. I don't think you'll jump up to number 1, Ohio State. That just won't happen. But there's definitely a chance they'll at least move up to 3 and maybe even number 2 if they're able to get it done out in Eugene this weekend. So we're going to go ahead and continue talking about this upcoming weekend's game between the Ducks and the Hoosiers with Doug from the QB11 Show here in just a moment. But real quick, I'm now going to talk to you more about Academy Sports and Outdoors. They carry all the gear you need from the top brands, like I said, all at prices that you'll love. And now shopping with Academy is more convenient than ever. They offer free assembly on in-store purchases of bikes and grills, plus free and easy curbside pickup on academy.com orders. You can also save even more by opening and using an Academy Sports and Outdoors credit card. That'll get you 5% off future purchases when you're approved. Save time and money at Academy Sports and Outdoors. And, of course, have fun out there. All right, joining me now for the first time here on In Touch with Indiana Sports, we've got Doug from all the way out in Oregon, also from the QB11 Show. Pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looks like you guys are going to travel out here. Well, I don't know if you're coming, but you're welcome. Hopefully, if you do, I'll hook you up at the tailgate. But your boys will be traveling all the way out here to Autzen Stadium to take on the Ducks this weekend at game day.
Yeah, second West Coast road trip for Indiana and for Kurt Signetti since, all this big conference realignment. The road trip last year was UCLA, of course, a much different animal this time around, heading out to Eugene against what some people think is the best team of the country. Could be the second best, third best, who knows? But either way, definitely going to be Indiana's biggest challenge since they faced Notre Dame in the college football playoff.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It should be a great game. Obviously, I mean, I kind of think Oregon, Ohio State, and Miami are probably the best 3 teams. Argue about whatever order you want to put them in. I don't care. It'll sort itself out in the end. But Indiana, look, they got a chance to put themselves in that conversation as well. Obviously, they're ranked very high, undefeated. Great year last year. But this is kind of one of those games, I think, where Indiana wasn't able to win a game against a helmet school or an elite talented program, whatever you want to call it, right? They couldn't do it against Ohio State. And then obviously they couldn't do it in the playoffs against Notre Dame. But here's an opportunity for them to kind of stamp their arrival at an even higher level than they already have.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's clear right now under Signetti that Indiana is definitely in the top tier of the second tier, if that makes sense. And not just talk about the Big Ten, but I would say they're just outside of elite level football. And I think a lot of that is the talent discrepancy from some of the elite teams like the Oregons, the Ohio States, that sort of thing. But the level of execution in which Kurt Signet's been able to get his team to play against, no matter who they go up against, for the most part, is definitely kind of their calling card. And this will be their first opportunity this season to really see how things maybe have changed since last year whenever they were outmatched by both Notre Dame and Ohio State pretty handily. They were in the Ohio State game for a decent portion of that game for a while, but of course, Ohio State kind of turned on the Jets at some point, realized that they were indeed the better team. And then from in the Notre Dame game, it was kind of not from the get-go a win for Notre Dame. There was that early pick, if I remember, from Riley Leonard that kind of got things going for Indiana in that playoff game. But Notre Dame answered pretty well. They showed that they were the dominant team in that matchup. And so, kind of like you mentioned earlier, this is Indiana's next chance, first time this season, to really see if they've taken a step forward against one of the true big dogs of college football, this time being Oregon, and a really good litmus test to see, I mean, really where expectations can be for the rest of the season for the Hoosiers, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, you got to feel good about where you're sitting, right? And then the schedule sets up nicely. Win or lose this game, you got a chance, to come back and, make some headway even afterwards, right? Nice little home games against Michigan State, UCLA. Obviously, UCLA knocked off Penn State last week, but, I think they're still the team that we've seen through 5 games for the most part. And then really that at Maryland, at Penn State, kind of.
I think I'm more worried about. I'm more worried about the Maryland game on the road more so than I am about Penn State right now, just because of where it seems like the Nittany Lion program is heading. I almost feel like Oregon was able to kind of knock the wind out of their sails because Penn State's still clearly a good team with a lot of talent, but they didn't look anywhere near the part against UCLA this past weekend.
Yeah, I think that was the classic, like, don't let a team beat you twice situation, right? And I think and I think Franklin said some things after the game that made it pretty clear that they were not in the right place, of preparation going into that game at UCLA, and it obviously showed, going down 20 at the half and not being able to come back. So, yeah, that'll be an interesting one. That's more further down the road, though. But as we look at this game, Indiana came out to Autzen one time previously, right?
That's right. It was the early 2000s, 2003, 2004. I believe it was the Jerry DiNardo era, one of the worst eras, at least in recent memory. There's not a lot of good eras of Indiana football. We'll be clear right there. But Jerry DiNardo.
2004. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I believe I read somewhere, this might be incorrect. I thought Indiana was the most recent Big Ten team to win an Autzen, but was it Michigan State? I think that might be the actual correct answer, the last team to win out there.
Michigan State
from the Big Ten.
Yeah, Michigan State, we beat them here, and then we lost at Michigan State.
Okay.
That's a great. Okay. outside of obviously the other Pac-12 teams, you're talking about traditional Big Ten. I don't know. Yeah. I'd have to go back and look. It's probably been quite a while. Obviously there hasn't been that many games here and there, but it's probably been quite some time since one of the legacy Big Ten schools has won out here, just primarily because there hasn't been that many games. It might be that Indiana team in 2004, which it's funny. That team started off the year by beating Central Michigan and that win in Oregon, and then they ended up 3-8.
And that was a top year. 20 Oregon team, if I'm not
mistaken. It was a rough year for Oregon. Actually, they finished 5-6, didn't make a bowl that year. But the crazy thing about that game is Oregon had 7 turnovers in that game.
Yes,
they actually
I was reading the story on how that game played out, and it was a lot of special team stuff, a lot of turnovers, as you just mentioned, and a lot of things. Indiana had a big lead that they nearly let slip away in the waning moments of that game.
Yeah, Oregon outgained Indiana 495 yards to 198. So a 300-yard advantage. But the drive chart, Oregon's drive chart, fumble, punt, fumble, punt, fumble, fumble.
Wow.
Downs. Yeah, it was just and then at the end of the game, interception. And then it was just a lot of turnovers in that game.
Well, let me ask you this real quick, Doug. Obviously, Oregon was a really good team last year. In an unfortunate way, things ended with their loss to Ohio State in the college football playoff at the Rose Bowl. But what would you say right now? Again, it's 5 games into the season for both teams. What do you think is the biggest difference between last year's Oregon team and this year's?
So defensive backs, probably the biggest thing, right? So if you look at since Lanning got here, They'd been recruiting obviously at a very high level, but a lot of those guys weren't really playing much until this season, right? Because they were Lanning and the staff had a really good strategy of, we're going to recruit high school and load up our roster with this elite high school talent. But at the same time, we don't want to drop back and win 7-8 games. We want to also win at a high level. So the first 2-3 years, they brought in a lot of transfers and a lot of high level transfers, right? And so they were actually able to win 10, 12, and last year 13 games with a roster that was kind of a blend of homegrown talent, but most of the key players being transfer players. And then this is really the first year where it's kind of flipped the other way, where there's still a few key transfers on the roster delivering at a very high level, but also for the first time, we're seeing a lot of these second and third year players that Lanning and staff recruited, in 2024 class, 2023 class, are really now coming into their own and taking a lot of those reps. But going back to the defensive backfield, right, it's a whole new starting lineup this year across the board. Talent wise and just athletic trait wise, they're just a much different unit. Last year, Oregon didn't have a single starting DB who was over 6 foot tall. This year, they're all over 6 feet tall. And so they have a lot of length at corner. Their primary two starters are starting a true freshman, Brandon Finney, at one corner, and he's been absolutely light. So he's been thrown to 15 times. He's only given up 2 catches. True freshman on one side, and then on the other side, they've been using a combination of redshirt freshmen, Ife Obadegwu out of the DC area, as well as transfer Theron Johnson coming over from Northwestern, and then a couple other younger guys as well. But they got a good deep rotation there, and then safeties has kind of been a whole makeover as well, with again a combination of another Big Ten transfer, Dylan Thinneman, coming over from Purdue, kind of like the quarterback of the back end there, but then 2 young players in the nickel position, and a redshirt freshman, Aaron Flowers, who's playing really, really well at the other safety position. So I think that's been probably the biggest transition from last year to this year at a position level. But I think it's kind of emblematic of what we've seen across the roster. We've seen the same thing in the defensive front, for example.
And then what about Dylan Gabriel and Dante Moore? Obviously, Dylan Gabriel was a fantastic quarterback for you guys. It kind of feels like it was plug and play with Dante Moore this time around. Do you think there's a big difference between those two and their styles of quarterback?
Yeah, absolutely. Dylan Gabriel was a very experienced quarterback, right? I think he has the most starts in college football history, right? So I think he had passed Bo Nix for that, who was Oregon's previous quarterback, right? So Oregon went from the last 3 years of having like the most experienced quarterbacks in college football history as the starter, and to a guy who had started 5 games at UCLA. Beyond that, they're also very different from a skill set standpoint. So I think Gabriel, if you watch what he did, obviously veteran presence, really good game manager, but he didn't have the arm talent that Dante Moore does. Not even close, right? Like Oregon was limited in what they could do with Gabriel, especially in the middle of the field, because of his lack of arm strength and also his height, right? He couldn't see over the line. He had vision problems in the middle of the field. So there was a lot of kind of one read offenses, or a lot of RPO game, a lot of short game, a lot of quick game, which obviously was very successful for Oregon because he was extremely accurate and very adept at making a quick decision, right? And it was get the ball out fast, get it to the playmakers, let them make plays. And obviously with Tez Johnson and Kenan Sadiq and Terrence Ferguson and some of the other guys they had last year catching the ball, that was a very successful strategy, until it wasn't. This year with Dante Moore, the whole field's open, right? I mean, that guy's got an NFL arm. You've seen it almost every game now, being able to throw a 30-yard out on a rope, or to drop a dime in on a deep post pattern, or a fade route, or a wheel route, or something like that. So extremely accurate, extremely live arm, a lot of power there. He can see the whole field. He can throw to the whole field. So I think that's really, you're seeing Oregon kind of more of the full route tree is open to Oregon this year in the passing game. And Dante's been, there's a lot been made about him sitting a year behind Dylan last year. I think it'd be interesting to see, if he was originally committed to Oregon, was supposed to come here as a true freshman, he would have sat basically during Nix's last year, redshirted, and then potentially he could have been the starter last year as a redshirt freshman, but instead he went to UCLA, spent a year there, mixed bag there, and then he came last year and then sat for a year. So I think it's been a really good experience for him, and not just playing behind Gabriel, but also learning the system and being ready for his opportunity now this year.
So if Indiana is going to find success in Eugene on Saturday, what do you think is Oregon's, like, what will Indiana have an easier time maybe exploiting more so than anything else?
I mean, it's a good question. I mean, this is a good football team, right? Oregon's, obviously they're both very good football teams. Oregon's really good on both offense and defense. I think turnovers is, it's not something you can necessarily game plan, right? But I think if Indiana's going to find success, I think they're going to need to win the turnover battle. Pretty standard stuff there from a football analysis perspective. But, going a little more specifically, I think they're going to have to slow down Oregon's run game, force Oregon into third and long, right? Like Oregon lives in, third and manageable, right? Second and medium, third and short, right? And then they're going to be very aggressive on fourth down, right? And that's where we saw that they went for four. There's 7 fourth downs in the Penn State game, and Lanning has always been very aggressive on fourth down, not just on the plus side of the field, but also on the short side of the field. If you're fourth and a yard, that's probably a go for it situation in most scenarios for Oregon. So that allows you more play calling flexibility on third down, right? If you're in third and 4, third and 3, you can run the ball now. You don't have to get the first down if you got another down to get it, right? And so I think that's the way you'll see Oregon call a game. So I think if Indiana wants to prevent those kind of four down territories and prevent third and shorts, they really need to do better on stopping the run on first down and second down and getting Oregon into those third and long situations to slow down their offense. Oregon's offense has explosiveness to it, but it is more of an efficiency offense, overall, and will kind of execute drives down the field. So if you can get them off their pace, either with a penalty or a stop, and get them into third and long, then that's your opportunity to slow down their offense. On the other side of the ball, I think it's kind of the opposite. I think you're going to have success running. Oregon's pass defense is extremely good this year, and if you get yourself into third and long situations, then those Tatum Teote, Mateo Uiagalelei, and the other pass rushers on that, in both on the interior and the edges of that defensive line, are going to be able to kind of key off on that third and long situation. So you got to be able to keep, or Indiana's going to have to be able to keep the ball moving in the run game and kind of keep themselves set up in third and manageables.
I'd say the one thing that definitely concerns me is in Indiana's most recent game against Iowa, it's definitely the first time in a while that I've seen Indiana kind of have to give in to the mucky, kind of yucking it up type of play that Iowa likes to do. And if Indiana is unable to dictate and not that Oregon plays a similar style, I'm not trying to say that at all, but point being, when Indiana plays a team that has better talent than an Iowa or somebody similar and has to play that style, I think that's when they're definitely going to run into trouble. And they definitely don't want Oregon to kind of dictate how this game goes whenever we get to Saturday. But I do want to ask you now about Dan Lanning. I feel like Dan Lanning is kind of I would say he's the most popular, objectively the most popular head coach in the country. Would you dispute that if I said that?
I mean, he certainly is getting a lot of notoriety and attention. I mean, he's 40-6 since he took over head coaching job here, which obviously is very successful. He certainly gets talked about a lot. I mean, in most ways in a positive light, but certainly there will be detractors as well. So, but what do they say? No, there's no such thing as bad press, right? I do think he's very popular, and I think that he's kind of taken a more outspoken stance, especially I've noticed. He kind of has that. He kind of has that.
I said this to somebody else, and you would know him better than I would just from watching the Oregon program closer than I do. But from afar, he kind of gives off this Friday Night Lights-ish type of coach. Is that a fair comparison?
I didn't watch that show, so I don't know. Okay. Sorry, it's a bad answer. I probably should go back.
No, you're good.
I've heard good things about it. If you saw after, I can't remember which, it might have been the Northwestern game or early game this season, he spoke on kind of the, political violence, gun violence stuff. It was the week after the Charlie Kirk assassination. I don't want to get into politics here. Yeah. And he didn't either, but the message that he sent, I thought was really good. And if you haven't had a chance to, you can probably Google that and listen to it. And it wasn't a political message at all. It was just a really heartfelt message. I think the one thing that the detractors about Lanning fail to grasp, and you know what, you can criticize his fourth down decision making if you want. I'm a fan of it, for the most part, or you can criticize this or that. But I think anyone who understands him as a person and follows him in this program, like, he is an authentic dude. There's no phoniness, there's no fakeness about him, and I know some fans up north will disagree with that, but that's just their own purple glasses, bias a little bit. But and he is authentic to who he is, inside the locker room, to the media, to his team, to his parents, to recruits, to coaches, and everyone around the country. And I think that's that's a really great trait for him to have, right? And he's a great motivator. I mean, his game day speeches, pregame speeches, he can take the littlest thing and turn it into a spark of motivation. So I'll be
I feel like
interested
he
to see
went
what he's going
viral a
to use
couple of
this
years
week.
ago when undefeated at the time, Colorado came to town. And I don't remember exactly everything that he said, but it was like they're chasing clicks. We're I don't remember exactly what he said Oregon was doing, but he said they're Hollywood, we're something else. And I think that's kind of whenever I think of the whole Friday Night Lights-ish vibe, I think that's kind of what I think of. I think that's where that comparison comes from. But either way, you got two really big personalities in different ways with Dan Lanning and Kurt Cignetti going at it on Saturday. And I think that should be a very fun head coaching matchup, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Cignetti's like, what an exceptional job to come to Indiana and overnight turn what the losingest football.
Oh yeah, hopefully not anymore, but
not anymore. But I mean,
all-time
losses, right? Like, I mean, they've just. I can't imagine being a Hoosier fan for all the years. Like, there hasn't probably been a lot. I'm not trying to like diss on you on your own show, but there hasn't been a lot of highlights over the years, right? So
you are saying facts. The most successful tenure in the history of Indiana football was a guy by the name of Bill Mallory back in the 80s, and I'm pretty sure he finished with a losing record. So, like, there's no competition when it comes to success at Indiana. I don't think it will ever be matched what Kurt Cignetti has been able to do. It may continue to do, hopefully, for however long he ends up staying in Bloomington.
I mean, it's an absolutely incredible story for him to be able to come in there to this place that has never had any kind of sustained winning, and to turn them from a 3-9 team to an 11-2 team in 1 year. I mean, that's just an incredible coaching job. 1-8 in the Big Ten to 8-1, and then obviously again, I mean, I'll be honest. I thought it was a 1 year flash in the pan. I kind of like, they'll fade. I mean, I didn't think they were going to go back to 3-9, but I'm like,
I thought it'd be more of a quicker, more of a drop off,
7-5 team this year. And I was wrong. I mean, I was wrong.
Well, you're not alone there. I definitely feel like the national narrative was that, Indiana, there's no way they can repeat what they did last year. And they still might not, but they're certainly right now on the trajectory to potentially be able to get back to another 12-team playoff. Again, plenty of season left, but there's been nothing that I've seen so far that tells me that they can't do it. But again, they still have to do it. They have to, put the product on the field and put their money where their mouth is, as they say. But I do want to ask you this too, and then we'll wrap this thing up here shortly.
Yeah, you betcha.
I've asked this to all of my first-time guests this year, I feel like. But if let's just say Indiana has the season that we're talking about, they repeat, go back to the playoff, that sort of thing. Do you think an elite level job, you throw Florida out there as an example, maybe some people wouldn't call them an elite level job anymore, it just depends on who you ask. They are still an upper tier SEC job. Do you think Cignetti leaves for something like that this year or in years to come? I mean, obviously, he's in his mid-60s, so there's definitely, I think that's the weirdest part of all of this. If Cignetti's 20 years younger, I think a lot of people would say it's a no-brainer that he jumps to a different job that has better resources than in Indiana. But what say you, Mr. Doug?
I mean, certainly I wouldn't know his, what he wants and desires, out of his life, but as certainly not better than you probably already do. I mean, I think the age thing is probably the biggest question there, right? He's 64, will be, or 64. And so it's more about what will someone offer him one of those jobs at that age, or will they look at it as, no, we're going to go pursue something. Hell, if he was even 10 years younger, he'd get offers left, right? And he still might, right? I mean, we're seeing some of these coaches that, older coaches coaching and having some success. So all it takes is one of those programs to decide he's their guy. Now, whether he would take it or not, obviously it's a question I certainly, can't speak to. I think a program would be stupid not to consider him, right? Like, I mean, this is a short-term business anymore, right? Like, if you think he's 64 and he's got 5 more years in him, then why would you pass on that? Just like,
the thing, if you're and I'm not encouraging that Cignetti leave by any chance, but I mean, if you're a Florida or any team that expects to win national championships, surely even if you think you're going to get only 5 or 6 years out of them, you may take the gamble and say, hey, we might win half of those seasons, the national title potentially.
Yeah, or even one, right? I mean, at this point,
even one. They don't even have to win multiple.
In a 12, or if you're one of those teams that's looking for a coach, you're probably not even in the playoffs at all, right? Like, can we just get ourselves back into the place where we think we should be, and then do some damage once we get there? And this is a guy that has, I mean, a proven track record of of success everywhere he goes, and quick success. I mean, it's pretty darn impressive. Like, I mean, what he did, at James Madison, obviously, but then, moving up from FCS to FBS and going, 19-4 in 2 years, like that's insane. And then, taking Indiana and that story, like it's inexplicable. Like someone should give him a shot.
Hopefully he stays in Bloomington for my sake, but either way. Last thing I do, this is just a quick one, and if you don't have a prediction, you don't have to give one, but how do you see the game going down this Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm a Duck fan, but I try to set that aside. Not always easy.
It can be difficult.
I do think the fact that this is in Autzen and not in Bloomington, I think is a big factor in this game. I think Indiana is shown to be, quite a bit stronger at home than on the road over the course of Cignetti's tenure the last couple of years. When you kind of compare,
they bury teams
relative,
at home, for sure.
Yeah, they bury teams at home. And then obviously they've played some of the tougher teams on the road. So I think that's a factor. Autzen is a very tough place to win. And Oregon is a really good football team with on paper, at least, significantly more talent than Indiana. So I think Oregon wins. I personally don't think it's going to be like a one-score game. I don't think it's going to be a blowout necessarily, but I think it's I would say a comfortable win, maybe in the 12 to 15 point range.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see the spread has significantly shifted in Indiana's favor in the last 24 hours. I believe when it opened last week during the bye week, it was 10.5. Now I'm looking at 7.5. So honestly, I tend to lean more toward your thinking. I think Indiana's definitely going to take a step forward when it comes to, you're not going to have a blowout fashion loss like you saw with Ohio State and Notre Dame. And I know the Notre Dame game ended up not necessarily being a blowout, even though they comfortably won that game. I think this is something where you see it be competitive for maybe even all 4 quarters until maybe something just kind of changes, tilts the tides in Oregon's favor late in the game. But I think that would still, to me, be enough progress to show that Indiana is definitely making headway and being more competitive at that elite level. Of course, I hope that they prove me wrong and win the game.
Of course.
I think it's more realistic to think that that's more of a likely outcome at this point.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's totally fair and reasonable. I think this is a test, and obviously it's a test for Oregon too, right? But it's as your program is, and someone who's watched Oregon's program build and grow over a 30-year period, right, to get to the point that they're at now, right? You have these tests along the way, right? And sometimes you pass them and sometimes you fail them, but it's kind of a what do they call it? A litmus test or a sounding board kind of game for Indiana, right? Like it's a measuring stick. Okay. And I said that about, at the beginning of the season, I said that the game, the whiteout game in Penn State was going to be a litmus test game for Oregon. That was before I'd seen them play, right? I felt better about the game after watching them play the first 4, but there was a lot of young guys on this team, young quarterback on this team. I thought going into Penn State, win or lose, it's a litmus test game. And I kind of feel like this is one of those games for Indiana. Okay. Everyone's got the story about, okay, Indiana, they beat up on the teams A, B, and C, but when they get to a Penn State or a Michigan, or obviously they won the Michigan.
It's honestly the same story that Penn State's kind of been dealing with, except they haven't been dealing with for as long of a time.
Yeah, it's almost like the opposite. Yeah, it is. Yeah, very similar. So I think it's a test for Indiana, and I think it'll be interesting to see how they measure up, win or lose.
Doug, I appreciate it. Hopefully I didn't keep you too long, but good conversation, and I would say good luck to your Ducks, but I do hope it's a good game.
All right, yeah, I'll be down there. It's not going to be the best of weather. It's going to be a little drizzly, a little rainy, high 50s, low 60s for the game. So it'll be, and it's good football weather. It's not going to be like too crazy or anything, but we'll see what happens there. I think Indiana needs to avoid the early run out, right? I think in these type of games, if Oregon gets up 14-0, then you can have the snowball type of game, right? And I think if you're Indiana, you got to at least avoid that early excitement and energy in the building and try to keep it within distance, and then you can settle into hopefully if you're Indiana, what can be a competitive football game. So we'll see how that plays out.
Again, where can people find you again?
Yeah, follow me you can follow me on Twitter at Douglas TS. I am a co-host with my podcasting partner QB11 on the QB11 Show. You can follow us on Twitter and find all our links there, or Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Appreciate you having me on and letting me chat about this game with you.
Thank you, Doug. A big thanks to Doug for coming on In Touch with Indiana Sports. Appreciate having new guests on all the time. And he did a fantastic job of letting us know what to expect with the Oregon Ducks. And honestly, there is a fear in me that this is going to just be the next iteration of kind of getting run out by a team that does have more talent than you on paper. But there's also that part of me that says that this team is just not even a little bit, but maybe even a lot better than last year's Indiana team. And that team was one of the best ever to do it in Bloomington. And so we're going to find out a lot about Indiana football and where they stand with the big boys and whether or not they should truly be considered to be a national title contender. And that has me excited. So again, big thanks to Doug for the conversation. All right, we're going to transition to do a little basketball talk with Kyler Staley. I know we haven't done a lot of that yet in the last several weeks, but we are getting close to basketball season, a new era of Indiana men's basketball with Darren DeVries, a lot of excitement going on. And we're going to talk about some of the events that have taken place over the last week or so with Indiana basketball. And I'm looking forward to sharing my conversation with Kyler with you here in just a moment. But before that, I'm once again going to tell you about Rhoback Activewear. There's only one way to describe Rhoback. That is best fit and best feel. And for those who aren't familiar with Rhoback, they're completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear. Rhoback has released so many items within their new licensed game day collection with novel polo designs and clean hoodie and quarter zips. It's definitely worth checking out. Nobody else on the market is pairing this level of custom designs with this quality of activewear. Rhoback's everyday shorts or their Delta Performance pants are the perfect pairing. They are both super comfortable, have an elastic waistband, and great fabric that is made to have the appearance of a nice short look, but the comfort for a day on the move. Rhoback has also been proudly leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with multiple college football stars and are becoming the go-to brand for college athletes across the country. Now, if you haven't heard this before, you can use the code IND20 on Rhoback.com for 20% off all new customers. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. That'll give you 20% off all performance polos, shirts, and more. And if you're looking for something nice to give to that Indiana fan in your family that wants something maybe a little bit more, I guess, luxury. It is kind of luxurious in a way. I've showed you what these look like before. I may do that again here in the future, but we're coming up on the holiday season. You want to get started on your early holiday shopping, use that code IND20 for a generous 20% off. Joining me now, basketball recruiting analyst Kyler Staley. Welcome back to In Touch with Indiana Sports, as always.
Thanks for having me back, John. It has been a hot minute since I've been on here, it feels like.
It has been. I can't remember. We may have done something right around the Bahamas trip during the summer, but it feels like it's been a while since we've really talked not that we're completely at basketball season yet, but we're finally on the cusp of a new basketball season.
Yeah. The last time we talked, what I can remember it was before the Puerto Rico trip, not the Bahamas trip.
That's right. Yeah. I get the Puerto Rico trip is where Darren DeVries took his whereas Mike Woodson. That's where he had took his previously 4 years ago, whenever that was.
Yeah, and I remember the last time I was on here, I was driving through the mountains of Tennessee on my way to Charleston.
That's right. Now I remember that.
Yeah, no, hopefully Wi-Fi is all good here and everything. So we're back. I'm glad to be back. It's been a minute. Your show's been great, by the way.
I appreciate that. And whether you're yanking my chain or telling me the truth, I'm just going to assume you're telling me the truth. So I appreciate it.
I'm a mystery guy. What can I say? So
anyway, so we're officially in October. We're not far off from some real basketball in about a month from now. It might even be exactly a month from now. I don't have the schedule in front of me, but there have been a lot of preseason events going on with Indiana men's basketball. And one thing, I guess we'll start with kind of the informal media day that took place not so long ago. What was that kind of experience like? Get all new players for the first time in a while, new head coach. What was that day kind of all about?
Yeah, so I mean, it was a little bit different because obviously Indiana's been doing their own like Indiana men's basketball, women's basketball media days over the past few years. That was something that was kind of started during the Mike Woodson era. I think probably 2-3 years ago, I would say. Obviously, with the Big Ten media days, you only get so little of the Indiana side. You get Coach DeVries and you'll get Lamar Wilkerson and Tucker DeVries this week as well. But that's only a small sample. Where in this kind of situation, you talk to most of, if not all, the guys there. But I think the big thing that I really enjoyed out of it was got to watch an open practice. And that's a new thing that I know that I can't even remember the last time, the Indiana men's basketball program had like an open practice, and they've done it twice since DeVries been here. One in, I believe, June, and then they did one, the start of fall practices. So it was really cool just to see kind of how Coach DeVries runs his practices. It is very, very on time, very organized. It is, we are doing one drill. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time, stopping the drill to explain things and stuff. We're going to play fast. And I think that's obviously going to translate into their playing style. But, as far as the practices, it was intense. Those guys were going at each other, not in like a, fighting way, but obviously, a competitive way. So, there's a lot of really, really good things. Coach DeVries is not a guy that's going to scream and yell or anything. If he's got something to say, he will blow the whistle. He'll talk to that player. And then they'll go about it. And then if he needs to add a couple more minutes onto the clock for that drill, he will. So it was a really, really good day. Obviously, got to spend the whole day in Assembly Hall, and you can't ever beat that. But just good to talk to most of the guys, learn a little bit more about them, because these guys obviously brand new. You don't know much about these guys and stuff, but just having the chance to talk to those guys, it was really, really special.
I feel like there's always somebody, and it doesn't have to be necessarily with one specific team, but every team kind of has like that talker, the guy that you expect to really enjoy being behind the microphone. Who is that guy for Indiana this year?
That is without question Lamar Wilkerson. He is he's a very, very funny person. He is awesome. I mean, he's just super, they say, Coach DeVries is obviously very easygoing. It's like, you and me talking to each other right now. That's exactly how Coach DeVries would be. And that's exactly how Lamar Wilkerson is too. He's super easy to talk to, really funny guy. He's obviously, he's been through the grind. He started at the JUCO level, and then he, obviously played his way up to where he's at now. He's been in college for a while, so he's seen a lot of things. He's played against a lot of high major opponents, played against Indiana last year, so he's seen a lot of things, but now he's getting his chance to come play at a high major program, and one of the biggest at that. So you can tell he's just really, really excited. He's a really, really good guy to talk to, really funny.
And he made some very interesting news a few weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, where he had donated a portion of his NIL back to Sam Houston, where he came from.
Yeah, the Field of 68 did their college tour or whatever, and I think, if I can remember correctly, I think Indiana was the first stop. I think they went Indiana, Purdue, and then they went over to Kentucky and Louisville. But they had Lamar Wilkerson, on there and stuff. So he obviously, it's no secret he got a pretty large NIL package, to come to Indiana. One of the main reasons why he came to Indiana, obviously. But he gave it back. He gave a portion of that back to Sam Houston State, which I think is awesome. And the reason he said was, those guys, helped develop me. I wouldn't be here without those guys. And I think that's a really, really cool thing to do. I hope that, this story kind of, motivates other people like that are getting big NIL packages that are coming from like a low major, mid-major, to give back to those schools. Because obviously, money's really tight, with Sam Houston State, just using that as an example, you can imagine that money's pretty tight with those guys. So, and then also he talked about how, that Sam Houston State head coach, that I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's the one that said, you can't stay here, you need to go play somewhere else, you need to go play at the highest level. And that's exactly what he did. But overall, I mean, he's just an awesome guy. I mean, the whole team, they were really, really fun to talk to.
When you guys were at those open practices, who were some of the, I was gonna say some of the newbies, but again, that's all of them. Who are some of the players that kind of stand out to you so far?
Yeah, I mean, I'll first go ahead and still mention Lamar Wilkerson. That guy's a bucket. I mean, he's exactly what.
Well, real quick, since we keep, is he the clear-cut number one guy for Indiana this year? Well, since we seem to be mentioning him a lot early on, is he the guy early on that's going to be relied on as maybe your primary scorer?
I think so. I think he's going to be the team's leading scorer, but I'll also do a 1A, 1B with Tucker DeVries as well. The thing is with Tucker DeVries is that he provides so much production on pretty much all areas of the floor, whereas Lamar Wilkerson is going to be your knockdown shooter. And that's exactly what he is. I mean, John, I don't know if I've seen a better three-point shooter in my life than Lamar Wilkerson. And I'm totally
and maybe that's easy for Indiana people to say because we haven't seen a lot of good three-point shooting the last several years.
It's effortless. It was effortless. And he doesn't overthink his shot. And we haven't seen a guy, with that just, I'm going to fire this thing off in a long, long time, with a lot of it's, very like strategic and how they would get shots off back, the last 8 years or so. But, this guy's like, hey, I got an open space. That thing's going off. And he is very, very consistent. But besides Lamar Wilkerson, I'll throw out Trent Sisley, big fan of him. Obviously, I've been watching him since he was a freshman in high school, and he looks more than ready to be at this college level. Obviously, he's going to have those freshman hiccups as well. But, I mean, he gets it, and he's a very tough, hard-nosed kid, and he's going to be a major role for this team. He's not going to start this year unless something crazy happens, but he is going to play a very, very important part on this team. And then I'll throw out Tatum Conaway, really good. You can see why he's kind of, the head of the snake of this team, at that point guard spot, a guy that really takes pride in the defensive end. Tucker DeVries was great. I thought the pairing of Sam Alexis and Reed Bailey, those guys, look like they can play really well together, and they battle against each other a lot in practice. So, and then we didn't get to see guys like Josh Harris or Josiah Miles. Those guys were out, and Jason Drake, those guys he's still out as well. Nick Dorn's out. So I only got to see a small portion of like the main guys and everything. But at the same time, I mean, practice was intense, and those guys just really, really battle and just really want to compete at the end of the day.
You mentioned Sisley, and one thing I'm going to get into real quick with him. First of all, I feel like he played a key role back during the Puerto Rican games, if I remember correctly. And so hearing that, and then also hearing that he may not be a starter, that's interesting. But also during that Kirkwood event that I guess we can transition into here right now, that happened a few days ago, or maybe it was last week, he hits a shot from the top of some sort of balcony. I don't know if you saw that video on social media going around. Did you see what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Okay. Who didn't see that video?
Okay. I couldn't tell. I saw the look on your face. I was like, am I saying something that he's not aware about? I was like, sure.
Sorry, something popped up on my computer, so that was my bad.
But yeah, so Trent Sisley hits that shot. And of course, first of all, anybody making a shot like that, I know it's a stunt shot, that sort of thing. It's impressive to do something with all that pressure on you. And then in general, the event that took place, I feel like I'm kind of going in a bunch of different directions here. So I'll try to back things up with Trent Sisley. What do you think it would take for him to be somebody that maybe works his way into that starting lineup if he's not in that starting rotation from the get-go? And then we'll get into the Kirkwood stuff.
I mean, I hate to say it, but I would probably say an injury, maybe, where they would throw it out. Right now, the starting lineup, and I think it's pretty clear-cut, and you saw this kind of with the scrimmage on last Friday as well. It's going to be Connor Enright, Tatum Conaway, Lamar Wilkerson, Tucker DeVries, and Reed Bailey. Then you'll have guys like Sam Alexis, Nick Dorn, Trent Sisley, Josiah Miles, Josh Harris. You'll have those guys coming off the bench. But I think right now it would be great just for Sisley. It's not a whole lot of pressure on him to come off the bench. He can kind of sit down and watch the game. I can't remember, there was a player on IU a couple of years ago. It might have been Trey Galloway may have said something similar to this, but he was like, I like coming off the bench because I can actually watch the game a little bit and see how the game's flowing and then see where I need to go in and pick up the slack. And I think Trent Sisley's got an IQ like that to where he's going to be a spark guy off the bench. He can be a real mismatch at times. He's super athletic. Might be the most athletic guy on this team from what I have seen so far. He can shoot the ball pretty well and make plays around the basket, straight line drives and stuff, uses his length and everything. But I have no doubt in my mind, unless they just get guys that are just light years better than him, I have no doubt in my mind that he won't be a starter by his sophomore year. And then he will be a starter the rest of his career. But this year, he's a freshman. You don't see a lot of freshmen starting on these high major programs like that, especially a new type of coach as well. So, but I think he's going to play a very, very big role for this Indiana team.
So now going into the other thing that I was trying to, for some reason, mix into this conversation prematurely, what was it? Hoosier Hoops on Kirkwood? Is that the name of the event that took place?
I think that's what it's called. Don't quote me. It was something very similar. Kirkwood was definitely in the name. Okay.
And is this a brand new thing that Darren DeVries has put together, or where did this come from?
I mean, it's a brand new thing that Darren DeVries and the athletic department put together. Okay. It's replacing Hoosier Hysteria.
Okay, wow. I did not know Hoosier Hysteria was not happening.
Yeah, so it's replacing Hoosier Hysteria, which, if we're being completely honest, Hoosier Hysteria is very nostalgic. I remember growing up and being little and going to Hoosier Hysteria, waiting in the long lines, the whole day just so I can get a really good seat. But Hoosier Hysteria, unfortunately, has kind of lost its luster quite a bit over the recent years, and that's arguably due.
I always thought it was when they started bringing in the music acts a couple of years ago. I'd always thought that was a little like you could tell that they were kind of fishing for things that weren't there. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give Woodson credit. I think it was his first 2 years, or maybe it was in between his 2 and 3 years or whatever. But obviously, he was incorporating. I think Gucci Mane was one of them and stuff. But he was trying to bring a little bit more. What should I say? A little bit more
a younger audience.
Audience, yes, exactly. And it was it's a big recruiting event, or it was a big recruiting event. You would bring your top recruits that are coming in and stuff, and you're like, look at all this cool things going on. I've got Gucci Mane doing a concert right now. It's free and stuff. But they took away the scrimmage and everything, and it just wasn't what it used to be. And the main thing was that, a lot of the students weren't going there, where it was like DeVries was just like, okay, well, if the students aren't coming here, let's do something really cool. Let's go where the students are going to be. And that's Kirkwood. And
that's very smart.
Just by the visual of it and everything. Oh yeah. I mean, there were so many students wrapped around, the bars upstairs was popping, Nick's was popping and all that stuff. So, it was a really, really cool. I'm sure you've seen pictures of it and everything, but it was a very, very cool thing that they did. And, it was a ton of people. It was a really good turnout. I've heard really, really good things. And I think this is going to be the new thing moving forward. And DeVries wants to, get the students involved, get them excited. Students had no reason, Indiana hasn't shown anything the past 3-4 years or whatever. There was no reason for those students to, spend their Friday nights on, at Assembly Hall, especially not drinking or anything like that, like they like to do. So, but no, it was a great event. I'm excited. I didn't go this year, so I'll definitely try to make it next year.
So another thing that is coming back that I saw, I believe it's a Tom Crean era event. You have the Haunted Hall of Hoops that's returning this year. I saw.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's just another thing that was an old thing that kind of went away. I don't think that they did it during the Archie Miller era. They definitely.
I thought that was specifically a Crean thing, but maybe I'm wrong about
but
that.
It's just these little things, it's the simple things of getting, the fan base excited, getting those, free events, for these little kids that obviously are going to watch Indiana basketball, are going to be huge fans of Indiana basketball, getting them there and getting to meet these superheroes of players and stuff that they're going to grow up watching and stuff. And meanwhile, getting candy out of it and stuff. So, and like all the diehard IU parents, they're going to want to bring their kids and stuff like that. But it's just, engaging with the fan base. And you haven't seen that, with, Archie Miller. You didn't see that with Mike Woodson, and even Tom Crean's, later years and stuff, that kind of went away from that. He was really good about engaging with the fan base, but kind of went away towards the end of that. It's just something that Indiana's just not had. And DeVries is like, wins and losses, they're obviously going to be the most important things and stuff, but let's try to win the fan base back a little bit and get them excited, because right now, every fan of IU, they have every right to be a little bit questionable. They don't know what to expect with Coach DeVries. They don't know what to expect with this new team. And those are very, very fair thoughts and everything. But, he's going to try to win the fan base back. You go back to the Kirkwood thing. He bought the whole upstairs bar around. So, they're going to love that as well. So, but no, he's doing all the right things. He's trying to engage with the fan base. He's opening things up, like having media at open practice. He's not going to have that all the time, but just doing things like that. He's opening things up. And that's just something that you haven't seen from Indiana program in a long, long time, if ever.
Yeah. And I guess moving ahead, the next couple of things, we got 2 exhibition matchups. Of course, first you got Marion on October 17th, not too long from now. And then a very interesting exhibition matchup in Indianapolis against Baylor. That'll be, you can say it's a chance to see what things will be like. But, you can go back to last year, Indiana's exhibition against Tennessee on the road. They won that game. That was a good Tennessee team. And we all know how the season ended up playing out. So you can't really put a lot of stock into these exhibition matchups. I think the biggest takeaway from is that you finally just get to see what the team looks like in action for the first time against somebody that's not themselves, or someone, of course, that's from a different country, like you were doing back down in the Puerto Rico games.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, you're going to learn a lot more about this Indiana team early on versus Baylor than you are against Marion. The cool thing about Marion is that Pat Knight is the head coach there. So he gets to come back and stuff, and he'll continue. He's me being in the Indiana, the state of Indiana, and watching all these high school games and stuff, he's got a really, really good team of really good kids from Indiana. So they'll be competitive, but obviously it is what it is. You're playing against lesser talent and stuff. And, the main thing out of that is like, don't get hurt. Don't have anybody get hurt and stuff. But the Baylor game, that's going to be a fun one. I love the fact that Indiana's doing these marquee type of matchups in the preseason, versus Baylor versus Tennessee last year. They'll continue to do that, but I know that this Baylor exhibition game have been in the works for quite a while, ever since DeVries kind of took over the Indiana program. So they got it all set up, but it's a good team. Scott Drew's a really good coach, probably one of the top coaches in the country. So he'll bring definitely a very competitive team. I think the main thing you want to see out of Indiana is, one, their style. You want to see how they play. They're going to play fast. I have no doubt about that. They're going to get a lot of shots up. And you just want to see them against really good competition. It is what it is. With the Puerto Rico trip, they played one team that they won by like 60 something points, and two pro teams that, they came back and won. So they showed that they can face adversity, but at the same time, they went down by a lot early on. So it's kind of a catch-22, if you want to call it that. So, but I think it'll be a good test for Indiana. Obviously, like you said, you take these with a grain of salt in a way and stuff, but the main thing, stay healthy, be competitive and stuff, and get yourself ready to know what you need to work on as the season quickly approaches.
Last thing I want to talk to you about, and I don't think there's been any additional headway on this since I saw this taking place at the end of last week, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. NCAA tournament expansion. Apparently, they're inching closer towards that becoming more of a reality. There was, I feel like, some legs back in the spring, early summer. That kind of died down, and now the talk has kind of increased on that again. At this point, it seems inevitable. It also seems like nobody wants it to actually happen except for those who are in charge of actually putting the tournament together, those who are making the money off of it. What say you, Mr. Staley, on do you agree that it's inevitable? Do you think there's a way to, I mean, obviously, if it happens, you kind of just have to take it and get used to it, right? They know that basketball fans will they're not just going to quit watching the tournament because they added a few more teams. Right. People will be angry about it, but it almost feels like there's nothing that anybody can really do about the inevitable of this happening.
Yeah, unless you've got millions and millions of dollars and you're just really, I want to keep it how it is and stuff, you go ahead and pay the NCAA. I'm sure they'll take it. But I don't know. There's a lot of ways you can go about it. I've had, quite a bit of different thoughts with it and stuff. Nobody really, likes change like that. There was no reason to change, the NCAA tournament format. I do think eventually they are going to add teams. It looks like it's pretty concrete that they're going to. But at the same time, I mean, one, it's more basketball. Who's going to complain about more basketball? I think that's a really, really cool thing. And here's another thing, and I've seen a few people make this point, so I didn't come up with this point on my own, but they're going to add teams in there. It'll be 12 more teams or something like that, whatever that number is. So they'll add more teams into there that are very probably mediocre and stuff. And they probably won't go on deep runs, and then in a few weeks, the better teams, of course, you're going to have your Cinderellas and the guys that, upset some people and stuff, but the majority of those teams are not going to make deep runs and like it. So it's not even really going to matter at the end of the day. But at the same time, it is a little bit different. Obviously you're going to have teams like that. Like if you're on the bubble with this team or with this expansion and stuff, that kind of says a lot about your program and stuff. Yeah. So it's a different thing. There's a lot of different thoughts that I can kind of go down a rabbit hole on and stuff and make different arguments for each side and stuff. But at the same time, it's not really going to matter at the end of the day. I don't think. It's more basketball. You shouldn't complain about more basketball. It's not like they're adding 100 teams or anything like that. It's just, 12 more teams or whatever. And I think it'll be fine at the end of the day. So it's just got to kind of wait and see and play out and see what they end up doing, regardless.
It is just crazy though that you've had this format that's been put together for so long, and it was 64, then it was the 65, you had the one play-in game, then you had 68 with the first four. And the biggest argument I feel like you've seen specifically from guys like Greg Sankey, it's like they say that the problem is that it hasn't been updated. But the fact is it hasn't been updated is because it's so perfect, I feel like. Maybe at least I feel like that's the position of most people that don't want things to change with it. But again, it's always going to be about the money for all of these types of things, whether it be this college football playoff expansion. It's always going to be the extra moolah that they can bring in from this type of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right, and everything. And you look at
unless you're Greg Sankey, or I'm not. Maybe it's not just Greg Sankey. I know Tony Petitti with the Big Ten has made comments where they're in favor of that sort of stuff too. So, but either way,
it's a major reward to make the NCAA tournament. That is 100%. You're the best 64, 68 teams, whatever. You are the best group of teams to make that. It's a reward of itself that you make that tournament and stuff. Will it feel a little deflating if you are in that last, you know, group now, like of the expansion teams? Like, okay, did we really earn it and stuff, or are we just benefiting from the expansion? You can kind of look at it at both ways and stuff. I'm sure a lot of people kind of had that same thought with Indiana football last year, you know, with the expansion of the playoffs and stuff. It's like, yeah, they earned it and stuff, but like, okay, but they were like number 10 or 11, I can't remember, last year and stuff. Like, okay, they only benefited from, you know, the expansion. Some people have those thoughts or whatever and stuff, but at the end of the day, people will get used to it. I think it'll be fine. It'll be a 1-year thing where you're just like, I'm so confused by it and everything. But I think at the end of the day, it'll be okay.
Well, Kyler, I appreciate you coming on as always. And I'm sure we'll be talking a lot more frequently once we get into the thick of basketball season. But anything you want to promote before I let you go?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, just first of all, I always talk about just subscribe to our YouTube channel. We really, really appreciate it. It takes 2 seconds. If you're listening to this right now and you have a YouTube account, hit that subscribe button. It doesn't do anything for you. It really helps us a ton. But yeah, and then go over to thehoosier.com, subscribe there as well for just $1 your first week. You get a free subscription to The Athletic, which they have great content as well. So get over there, sign up for just $1, check out all of our premium stuff, join our community. I mean, we are really, really growing our community. It's a really good group of people, a lot of exclusive coverage. We have one of the best national teams there is out there, are pretty much the best, I will say. So, and then I've also finishing up a few basketball previews as well. Check those out. A few player previews and everything. And then we're heading, Alec and I think Zach and Colin as well, we're heading over to the Big Ten Media Days on Thursday. So we'll have plenty of coverage from there as well. So a lot at thehoosier.com, the best place to be for any IU coverage.
Crossover season is upon us. It's about to get very busy with football and basketball for the next really 2 to 3 months, especially depending on how far Indiana football goes into the postseason once again. So we'll have to see how all that ends up working out. But Kyler, thank you once again, and we'll do this again sometime.
Absolutely.
Big thanks to Kyler. Glad to have him back on. And like we just mentioned, I'm sure we'll be having visits with Kyler a little more frequently as we get into basketball season here in the next month or so. All right. Let's go ahead and get into our non-revenue sports shout-outs of the week. And sometimes these are unfortunately not good things. I know I always call them non-revenue shout-outs, but there's usually, I'm really just updating you on what some of these teams have been doing, and it's not always good stuff. And that's where we have to start, unfortunately. Indiana men's soccer unable to get the job done out west against Washington. They lost 3-0. 3-0. And they've been kind of trading off wins and losses for the last several weeks now. And it kind of feels like, especially after this loss to Washington, and this is kind of where Indiana men's soccer always is this point of the year. They always start off strong. They hit that kind of mid-season lull where you see some results that make you scratch your head a little bit. And then they kind of find their footing once again in that final third of the season. And so we'll see if they're able to regroup and kind of get back to their traditional winning ways and make a run at another deep postseason. Another deep a run at a postseason run. That sounds kind of ridiculous the way that I phrased that, but you know what I mean. We'll see if they're able to do that. Women's soccer, they're in an interesting position right now. They've drawn 3 times in a row. They had 2 draws on the West Coast with Washington and Oregon, and then most recently they drew Purdue 0-0. And then, I mean, they haven't won a game since September 7th. As of the day of this release, the show, it's been right at a month since Indiana women's soccer last won a match. But they've had several draws in that time frame. They've had a couple of losses, but 4 draws in this last month, and that's pretty wild because it's not uncommon to have a draw in soccer, but to have that many is it's pretty astounding. But women's soccer, and I'll go back to men's soccer here in a minute. I realize I didn't mention what's coming up for them. But women's soccer this week, they'll have Northwestern on Thursday at Bill Armstrong Stadium. That game will be on Big Ten Plus. and then at Michigan on Sunday. That game will be live on BTN. And then, as I mentioned, men's soccer, and I didn't say when and where they're playing this week. They'll be at home on Friday, playing at Bill Armstrong Stadium, of course. That game broadcast on Big Ten Plus. And then finally, we're going to end things on a very, very positive note. That's Indiana women's volleyball. They went out west playing two ranked teams, number 17 USC and number 24 UCLA. Got wins against both of them, 3-1 apiece. I mean, that is without a doubt the most impressive back-to-back wins. And I say back-to-back, they've won, 5 in a row now? 5 in a row. But that's a really good back-to-back stretch right there against two ranked opponents. And that puts them at 13-1 on the season, unbeaten in conference play, 4-0. So a hell of a good start to the season for Indiana women's volleyball. They'll take on Michigan this Friday on the road, and then they'll also be at Michigan State on Sunday, hoping to keep their unbeaten streak in conference play alive. So with that being said, that's going to wrap up today's episode. Appreciate you guys for listening and watching as always, and we'll be back next week to do it all again. But until then, this has been another edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by thehoosier.com.